That was what I was told by Irving, that she gave them an ultimatum, either Lindsey goes or I go.
Famously, conflict has always been a part of Fleetwood Mac, but the years of turmoil finally peaked in 2018, with Buckingham's firing from the band. Buckingham blamed Stevie Nicks for the firing, and he sued his former band, claiming he'd lost millions after being cut from the touring. In a new interview with Mojo, Fleetwood reflected on the band's tumultuous relationship. "It's no secret, it's no tittle-tattle that there is a brick wall there emotionally," he said. "I would love to see a healing between them, and that doesn't have to take the shape of a Fleetwood Mac tour necessarily." But where did this feud between Buckingham and Nicks begin? Let's go over the whole story, and let me ask you a question. Whose side are you on, Nicks or Buckingham's? In the late 1960s, during their senior year of high school, Buckingham and Nicks met. He was a member of Fritz, a psychedelic rock band, and invited her to join as the lead singer after two members left for college. Although they shared this passion for music, at that time they weren't romantically involved. Yet. Fritz remained active until the early 1970s, with Nicks and Buckingham dating other people. When they eventually decided to move to Los Angeles, the band disbanded, and Nicks and Buckingham became romantically intertwined. Nicks later reflected, "I'm not sure we would have even become a couple if it wasn't for us leaving that band. It kind of pushed us together." This is noted in Stephen Davis's biography of her, Gold Dust Woman. Now, their move to LA was actually postponed by about a year because Buckingham contracted mononucleosis. During this period, Nicks cared for him and their musical bond only deepened. When they finally arrived in Los Angeles in late 1972, they were immediately perceived as a sexy star-bound couple. People who encountered them recalled an aura about them, a radiance, Davis wrote. They were Mr. and Mrs. Intense, he in his curly locks and icy blue eyes, and she in her long straight hair and her piercing gaze when you talked to her. Amid the celebrity culture of the early 70s in Los Angeles, they formed a folk rock duo named Buckingham Nicks, and they released a self-titled album in 1973. Despite the iconic topless photo on the album cover, the record failed commercially, and their label dropped them. Tensions began to rise and financial struggles began to ensue. But their music making continued, and they soon produced early versions of hits like Rhiannon and Landslide. However, their relationship was strained. Nicks was worn out from her job as a waitress and cleaning houses, and Buckingham had just got back from a disastrous tour with Don Everly. On the last day of 1974, Fleetwood Mac encountered Buckingham in a studio after recently moving to Los Angeles and losing a few members. Fleetwood was interested in Buckingham's guitar skills, and of course Buckingham and Nicks came as a package deal at that point, so they both were invited to join the band. The duo took a few days to make their decision. Buckingham was hesitant, perceiving Fleetwood Mac as a band that frequently changed members. According to Gold Dust Woman, Nicks told Buckingham, "This is what we've been working for since 1968. And so, Lindsey, you and I have to sew this relationship back up. We have too much to lose here. We need to put our problems behind us. Maybe we're not going to have any more problems because we're finally going to have some money. And I won't have to be a waitress." Ultimately, everyone went out to dinner and the deal was sealed. Buckingham and Nicks joined Fleetwood Mac. During the creation of the album Rumours, released in early 1977, Buckingham and Nicks ended their romantic relationship. Around the same time, band members John and Christine McVie, married since 1968, also separated. McVie had had an affair with the band's lighting designer, Curry Grant. Mick Fleetwood's divorce was nearly finalised, though he remarried Jenny Boyd in 1977, only to divorce her again in 1978. He was also struggling with drug use. This tumultuous environment gave rise to songs like Dreams and Go Your Own Way. Rumours went on to win several Grammy Awards and remains one of the best-selling albums of all time. This intense working environment could be one of the reasons for the later animosity between Nicks and Buckingham.
My relationship with Stevie is fragmented.
Yeah.
I think there's still a lot of love there, but you have to begin with the fact that in order to get through those early days, it was kind of an exercise in compartmentalization for everyone emotionally.
Yeah.
And for me in particular, I was not the one doing the leaving, she left me, but there was never really any chance to get anything like closure, because that takes perhaps some distance.
Mm-hmm. So that's
and so that kind of, is how we got along. And I think, you cut to 20, 30 years later, and that leads to a kind of a fragmented relationship.
In Lindsey's mind, all the other women that came after me were all going after rich rock and roll star Lindsey. Nicks once told Rolling Stone, "Nobody was looking into the heart I had looked into. Nobody was seeing the guy before he was famous. We knew each other before, that's what makes us unique to each other." In 1977, Nicks had a brief affair with Fleetwood, despite Fleetwood being in his second marriage at the time. Meanwhile, Buckingham entered an 8-year relationship with Carol Ann Harris, to whom he got engaged but never married. Fleetwood described it as an unusual situation for a band to remain intact despite so many internal breakups. However, he noted that things seemed to be working out. "When we walk up on stage, the band is very close. There are lots of bands who detest each other, we're not one of those." The band continued on despite years of tension between Buckingham and Nicks. Nicks and Buckingham would exchange glares during performances of breakup ballads like Silver Springs. Originally intended for Rumours, the song ended up as the B-side of the Go Your Own Way single. Following her time with Buckingham, Nicks ended up dating several musicians associated with the band The Eagles, including Don Henley, J.D. Souther, and Joe Walsh. She briefly married Kim Anderson in 1983, the widower of her recently deceased best friend. But the marriage was short-lived and she did not have children of her own. Nicks has since found fulfillment in her relationships with her niece and godchildren. In 1984, Buckingham ended his relationship with Harris. In 1998, he had a son with photographer and interior designer Kristen Messner, whom he married in 2000. They later welcomed 2 daughters. And talking to CBS, Buckingham theorized that this could be a part of the reason for the negative feelings between them.
I think, sometimes she might find it difficult that I was lucky enough to find my soulmate late in life and got married and had my first child when I was 48, and have 3 beautiful children, and that was something she never did. She basically is living her professional life, and so maybe, I don't know if that plays into it or not.
Yeah.
In the 1980s, Buckingham began releasing solo albums, favouring studio work over the touring lifestyle. He departed from Fleetwood Mac in the late 1980s and remained absent for a decade. Nicks followed suit a few years later, leaving to focus on her solo endeavours, which produced hits like Edge of 17, Stand Back, and Stop Dragging My Heart Around. However, both eventually returned to Fleetwood Mac, and why wouldn't they? Any tour that Fleetwood Mac announced would generate hundreds of millions of dollars. In early 2018, with the band's tour dates already set, Buckingham requested a 3-month delay to focus on promoting his solo work. While the rest of the group was open to flexibility, Nicks stood firm that the dates were fixed and would not be changed. Tensions escalated in January of that year, and barbs were exchanged between the former couple. Shortly thereafter, Buckingham was dismissed from the band, replacing him with Heartbreakers guitarist Mike Campbell and Neil Finn of Crowded House. Buckingham later filed a lawsuit seeking millions. In court filings at Los Angeles Superior Court, Buckingham stated he suffered losses of up to $14 million or £10.5 million as a result. He accused Fleetwood Mac for 7 offences in total, including breach of fiduciary duty, breach of oral contract, and intentional interference with prospective economic advantage. He also alleged that despite their 43-year-long relationship, none of the band members communicated with him directly about this decision. According to the court documents, not one member of the band informed Buckingham directly about his departure, the document states. Later in the legal complaint, Buckingham says that he tried to reach out to John McVie, but John was told not to return his calls and not to communicate with Buckingham. The lawsuit was finally settled by the end of 2018, and Nicks has maintained that she was not the one who initiated Buckingham's departure from the band. In 2019, Buckingham suffered a heart attack and underwent bypass surgery. He mentioned that Nicks did reach out to him after the health scare, although her responses have been infrequent. While Nicks and Buckingham remained estranged, Buckingham and Fleetwood managed to reconcile things. It was the passing of founding guitarist Peter Green that prompted Fleetwood and Buckingham to reconcile after a 2-year estrangement. Green passed away peacefully in his sleep in July 2020 at the age of 73. "I found great joy in reconnecting with Lindsey, and it's been a gracious and candid experience," Fleetwood told Rolling Stone. "Both of us have been deeply honest about our journeys and how we arrived at this point." After re-establishing their relationship, Fleetwood expressed a desire to make music with his longtime collaborator. "I am certain that I want to make music and perform with Lindsey again," he said. "I would cherish that opportunity." It doesn't necessarily have to be within Fleetwood Mac. As for a Fleetwood Mac reunion with Buckingham, Stevie Nicks thinks it would be impossible now after the sad death of Christine McVie in 2022. She told Mojo there is no chance of putting Fleetwood Mac back together in any way. Without her, it just couldn't work. In the same interview, she commented on Buckingham's health problems, saying, "It's not for me to say, but I'm not sure if Lindsey could do the kind of touring that Fleetwood Mac does. It's so demanding." Buckingham, after focusing on recovering from his health issues, was served another blow in 2021. His wife filed for divorce after 21 years of marriage. This came just days after an announcement that Buckingham would be releasing a new album and going on a 30-date tour. The main heartbreak of all of this for Buckingham is that no one in the band stood up for him during their last conflict. He expressed a desire to rejoin Fleetwood Mac someday if Nicks would permit it. So, over to you. What are your thoughts on all of this? And do you think Nicks and Buckingham can patch things up eventually? And for another classic feud in rock history, why not check out my video on Noel and Liam Gallagher and where it all went wrong for Oasis?